AI getting embedded in general user applications that we're all already using on a daily basis. Those are going to be the things where we're really start to see some of these use cases unlocking because it's going to be right there in front of you. You won't even have to go to this other interface. You're just opening your Excel documents and stuff is happening.
Let's go. All right, welcome back to the Pubcast. I'm your host, John Loomer, and typically we're focusing on any type of marketing-related discussion. The things that are impacting us right now. So, whether that's Facebook ads related, could be entrepreneurship as well. But ChatGPT has just been the thing we keep coming back to. And I say ChatGPT, it's AI as well, and how that's changing our lives. And I've had Luke Elliott's a member of my team, and we've been working together for years. And Luke's even nerdier and more into all this stuff than I am, which makes him a great person to bring on to have these discussions. So, Luke, how are you doing? Welcome back.
Hey, how's it going? Happy St. Patrick's Day. I think we both got our green going, so that's
I
good.
didn't even mean to do this. This is
Yeah,
completely accidental.
good job.
Good job. So, obviously, okay. So we're recording this on St. Patrick's Day this week. What the big news was the announcement of GPT-4, which we've all been waiting for. What is this going to mean? What does this mean, Luke?
Well, I think the big thing that stuck out to me is not just the fact that that was the big announcement from OpenAI. So that was March 14th, right? Which was 3 days ago. But then Google had a big AI announcement, a little bit different because it wasn't an official launch. It was more like, hey, something's coming. And Microsoft then announced their big AI integration part. So I think we could talk about each of those individually, but I think the point of that is like we keep talking about this. It really feels like the pace has been accelerating on just the activity, and of course, it's almost you can almost see these companies kind of scrambling to like
Right.
announce before each other and try to get the headlines out. But wow, yeah, it was a big week, and I know that some of the folks covering the space, including Rachel Woods, who was on one of your earlier podcasts, she's even said like, I've seen her even doing some things like, oh, it's only 10 o'clock today, and here's all the things that have happened just today. This is increasingly feeling like there's just a lot to keep up with. So
Yeah.
we were kind of talking before the show just now is like my interest is also kind of keeping this like a little bit top level and not going too deep on some of these things because there is so much going on. So I think just those three big announcements I just wanted to kind of start off with, and maybe we could just go through them and
Let's
then
do
dig
that.
into the OpenAI GPT-4 announcement in particular, if that sounds sort of like a good flow for you.
Glug glug glug. Let's do that. Yeah, let's start with the GPT-4. I mean, what do we need to know about that?
So I believe you have watched the demo.
Mhm.
So there was a demo that OpenAI released. It's actually I really enjoyed the demo because it was like just a guy standing there in front of his computer and interacting with the computer and doing some really cool stuff. But the
Yeah.
big thing that I think has stuck out from that demo, and it's really short, you can find it online if you haven't watched it yet, was everybody's calling it the napkin demo. So I'm sure you saw the napkin demo, right?
Is that where he did the website?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That so it was at the end, and that was the part I think that got my attention more than anything else. But yeah, explain what that
yeah,
was.
and I think that's sort of the common theme. So just if you haven't seen it yet, I'll just really quickly describe what happens. So essentially, he's illustrating the capabilities of GPT-4 to ingest visual content and then to take action based on visual content. And what he does is he literally draws on a napkin a really short description of what he wants a website to be and do. He then submits it into GPT-4 via an integration. So it's not like a native functionality. That's one thing that a lot of people have been confused about. So we'll talk about that. But then it essentially just spins up this website just based on,
Mhm.
and he's using a few different integrations to do this. but it's an illustration of capabilities, and everything's sort of driven by the GPT-4 capabilities. And it's pretty daggone impressive because also, I don't know if you saw the image, but his writing was like super
Right.
messy and
Right.
really just some basic instructions. And it was not like it wasn't the most advanced website, but the
Yeah.
point was just the fact that it could do that. Basically, like, I mean, it's literally you draw your idea on a napkin and then it comes to life seconds later, in terms of what's being created. But I think one of the big things that I've seen out there is people are saying, well, it's not actually like able to do this visual stuff yet. And he says that he says like this is just an illustration, but I think that's confused some people.
Yeah, I mean, for somebody who kind of has fumbled through rudimentary code through his life, like I've never been a programmer. I've just like tried to know as much HTML or whatever to get me through, and always having to lean on someone else to like, I've got this idea, can you make this thing happen, right? Or it just never happens and you just never see it. To be able to say, I'm just going to sketch this out. And yeah, it was a joke website, I think it was. I don't even remember. Like there are two buttons or something. I don't even remember what it
Right.
was. Um, but and the the lack of detail he had in his napkin description, for that to just be able to spit out the code and create a website that functions is pretty crazy and exciting for anyone who like wants to quickly experiment. Like, I've got this idea. Is this going to work? What is this going to look like? And to for startups, I'm just thinking, top of my head, startups or anyone who comes up with a minimal viable product, to see, would people like this and consume it before they start, improving upon it, is kind of exciting and probably scary for developers, programmers as well. Um, but yeah, that got my attention really quickly. I mean,
Yeah.
what kind of thoughts did you have as you saw that?
Well, I mean, exactly aligned with what you're kind of calling out, which is sort of this like prototype culture that this
Right,
could create and sort of unlock, because that barrier to being able to do a lot of these things is based on sort of coding ability. Of course, there are other products out there that have been out there for years that are intended to make this stuff easier, but that seamless ability to literally again just draw it on a napkin. I mean, that's it's pretty remarkable. And I know, of course, there's a long way to go on a lot of
right.
these things, but I think it's just knowing again kind of what we were leading at the beginning of this conversation, the speed at which a lot of this stuff is going to start happening. It's hard to imagine that 1, 2, 3 years from now, we're not going to see pretty much an explosion of a lot of different types of things coming out there. I think for me, is more less about like website capability, but more like the ability to make an app,
Right.
and not my
Yeah.
like a user app, but like a data app that can do
Yeah.
something for people, and then of course integrate that with the website. I would love to see sort of all the ways that that's kind of stuff starts to come to life,
Cheers.
because one thing we're hearing about a lot in the space is like all of these different um, apps that are basically run on top of GPT-3 or GPT 3.5 as it is today, and then eventually going to be GPT-4, to do all of these different things that are going to be helping out different use cases. And one of the things that they did mention in the demo, is they're working with an organization called Be My Eyes.
Hmm.
Had you ever heard of Be My Eyes
Yeah.
before? Yeah,
So my wife Lisa uses that. Like
she's
she's
a
one of the
volunteer.
people is the volunteer. Yeah, for that. And so anyone who's not familiar with it, so basically it's people who have sight disability and they're alone and they need help. Do my clothes match? Or I am colorblind. What color are these shoes? Or I got this in the mail. What does it say? That kind of thing. And so yeah, there's this integration with GPT-4. Yeah, if you could explain that.
Yeah, so you said your wife's a volunteer on that. I am as well, and you kind of
Nice.
get these calls, and the way it works now is, of course, you're talking to the person. Their camera is then turned on. They're pointing it at something, and then you're
Mm.
just kind of telling them what they're seeing, answering their questions. And I think the accessibility play on these tools is incredibly exciting. I think that's really cool that they're kind of focusing there. One of the ways the app works is like it kind of sends the call out to a bunch of volunteers at the same time, and whoever kind
Hmm.
of answers first. But of course, people's experiences are inconsistent. You might have some people on there who are not really taking it seriously. Of course, the system is supposed to try to help weed those out, but imagine if you can really unlock this ability. Maybe I have a visual impairment, and like maybe I don't want to have to talk to
Right,
somebody.
right.
It's like maybe I want to just open my phone and have it tell me what's in front of me. Like I think that there's a lot of the option to be able to do that and to be able to unlock that at scale is pretty
Yeah.
daggone exciting.
And that's actually a point Lisa brought up too, is that as long as they make this an option, because there are a lot of people, first of all, who are excited to be the volunteers. But
Right.
beyond that, there are people who enjoy that personal connection
Right.
because of the fact that they're alone and they need this help. And sure, it might be great to get immediate feedback from the AI, but some people may prefer actually having that personal interaction. And not to mention, if there is like this threshold of dealing with technology, is that going to confuse especially older people even more when they're dealing with an AI? I don't know. But yeah, but still, either way, having that option is certainly pretty exciting. Not just for that app, but just
Well,
across
and
the
you were
board.
talking about the like interacting with a person thing. I mean,
Right.
the thing that I keep going to with a lot of these is just to envision a landscape where a lot of these different technologies are all playing together. So of course we've talked a lot about
Mm,
basically AI people. So it feels like you are interacting with a person. So imagine if they built that into where it's like I am interacting with my virtual volunteer and I'm
right.
having the conversation with them and I'm asking them the questions and it's responding in a human voice. Like that's not hard. That's not a big jump,
It's
to imagine
not.
that that's going to be. And so maybe it would be an option where you say, oh, I choose a virtual volunteer or a real volunteer. But the only thing that would stop you from doing a virtual volunteer is if you still feel like you get something extra from that real volunteer. And then at what point do you cross the threshold where the virtual volunteer is so much better and so consistent and so human feeling that
Right.
you're like you actually get the better experience there, and then you no longer go to the real volunteer. And that's kind of using this as a very specific example. You then play that out across lots of different types of industries, lots of different types of use cases. I mean, you're always going to have people who are frustrated with the interface. But if these interfaces can overcome whatever frustration point would exist on the other end of the scale with a real person, and you hear these things coming out in terms of food service and like, oh, AI is replacing jobs in
Right.
McDonald's or whatever it may be, and at some point someone is going to go, well, I don't want an employee who's pissed off at me today. I don't want to, and it's like, and by the way, I'm not like supporting that. I'm just
Yeah.
saying like this is an example of how
Right.
you start to play this out across all the different types of things. So let's say I've got a Facebook ads question. Well, I don't want to ask John Loomer. I'll just ask
Hey.
the AI, person.
Yeah.
And then what does that mean for you? And it's like that's uh I'm going off in like to the ideation tangent, but that's kind of when I see these demos, that's kind of where I go with it. Is like, well, what
Mhm.
about this? What about that? What about this? And then you combine that with what we're also talking about the other part of the demo, which is like again this prototyping culture. So like you can see this environment sort of brewing where lots of really fast prototyping, lots of testing, lots of birth and death of different AI tech. It's almost like a very very rapid evolution
Right.
process where survival of the most fit, whatever it may be, it starts to really happen at scale, and it's going to be interesting to see how that is enabled by some of these technologies.
It's a lot. It's kind of overwhelming. I mean, the thing, like, I feel like there's a rabbit hole you go down when you start talking about um, an AI that's human-like. That's a little scary. Like I immediately think about the most vulnerable people using that, right? So once again, Be My Eyes, like you have an older population usually. Um, do they understand they're dealing with an AI? I mean, I'm not talking about like right now, but eventually, if when they're dealing with an AI that is very human-like and they're having conversations with it, do they understand that they're not dealing with a human? And does that become problematic? And
I
not
think
to
the big
mention, like,
question is, do they care?
maybe, but we've also heard about immediately the way that people can use this for scams or are talking about using it as scams,
Exactly.
especially targeting the older demographic, where it's like you can have an AI or maybe not even an AI, but a voice disguising as like their grandson or something,
Right.
saying I need this
I'm in
money,
Mexico and I need some money. I'm
which is what
stranded. Yeah.
kind of scam you see anyway, but now more advanced.
Right.
So it's all this kind of stuff. It's like, oh,
Cheers.
so there was that part of the demo. I mean, was there anything else in that demo that stood out to you?
Nothing else in the demo, but I think it was reading some of the press that's covering it. One of the things that's really been called out, and I don't know if you've been kind of keeping up with any of this, is sort of how so GPT-4 is no longer like open sourced. So it's the
Uh,
OpenAI has kind of gone closed
hmm.
for lack of a better description on this, and so I think it's interesting again, kind of going back to that prototyping culture that we're kind of entering into is could you see that these folks who have really had a lot of energy and passion for the space go down another path of disruption? So like is there going to be some what other open source thing is going to kind of pop up as popular and kind of fill that gap if it does, right? So I think that's it's this really interesting example where there's kind of a perception of like, oh, did you sell out? Like
Yeah,
what does that look like? And so I just think about again that sort of prototyping culture, how that lives also in this kind of other things being developed to also serve the same purpose. And we know that there are other tools out there, of course, but a lot of them that are getting a lot of the press are kind of like, again, backed by large organizations, whatever it may be. So it's just that was just something that also stuck out when I was just kind
sure.
of going through all the press notes on it.
There's one other thing for me that stands out that, as far as what do people need to know what's going on with GPT-4, and it is related to that Be My Eyes part. It's the fact that there's this visual element now with GPT that didn't exist before. And so just trying to explain that to people. So first of all, the Be My Eyes, but also here's my mock-up, create this. It's the fact that the AI model, or it's a visual model. I'm going to really butcher explaining this, but the AI can understand an image, right? So, like one example I saw was taking a picture of, okay, these are all the ingredients I have to make something. Give me 5 ideas of breakfast or something that I can make with this, and
And
you
then it
don't
mistakes
tell,
your sugar for salt, and then you got an awesome
maybe.
output.
Or I don't know how accurate that is, right?
Right,
Maybe
right,
it's
right.
super accurate. Maybe it knows exactly what it is. But yeah, like you don't have to tell it what you have. It's like this is what I've got, and it gives you, 5 recipes or whatever. And that to me is super kind of powerful as well. I'm just trying to think of like, man, what can we do with that? Especially like if we're not real good at explaining things, and maybe we don't really know what certain things are, and we could just show a picture, and the AI can help digest that for us. What do you think? Thoughts on
Yeah,
that kind of
that's,
stuff?
I mean, I think that's it's kind of like we're also seeing where I would say in the past we've seen sort of more specialized AI, and OpenAI has talked about like this general intelligence kind of thing. And I've seen lots of people argue that, oh, it's not really that we're talking about with ChatGPT or whatever. So I won't go down that rabbit hole essentially, but I
Mm,
think what you're bringing up is we're starting to see these like crossovers in terms of capabilities all centralized within one tool. And I think in tech and software, you always have that. Like you'll always have these providers who try to be the all-encompassing thing, and then you've always have the specialized providers, and then there's always this push-pull there. Even thinking about things like how people think about social media, right? So like Instagram is good at X, Y, and Z. Snapchat's good at X, Y, and Z. Facebook's for whatever, and people kind of already
Right.
think about those things, but then you've still got the parent organization of Meta trying to connect different things together where they can, and it's always a push pull. So I think we're just kind of seeing that play out now in terms of AI capabilities, instead of saying like, oh, here's DALL-E, that's about image generation. Like, at what point would it be you're then talking to ChatGPT and then you're like, oh, I need 15 images that look like this, and then it's all sort of integrated into the same interface, right? And so like, or you say, let me show you a picture of what I've drawn. Can you make it better? And like, and
Hmm.
then it's all like kind of integrated into that same system, to where you still have that chat interface functionality. And then I think sort of the next step becomes, and using that Be My Eyes example, is like, at what point are you just talking to it? It's like you're on the Starship Enterprise and it's tea Earl Grey hot. It's like, then it's, which, sorry, that's a super absurd
It's
nerd reference.
super.
But
I don't know what it means, but it's
that's all right.
I know where you're going though.
I'll
Yeah.
forgive you for it. But that is where you start to see like some of these things kind of, it just becomes the question of when will they be more integrated into this single uh, accessibility interface, and even the accessibility thing. So we talked about the visual impairment sort of uh, challenge being solved for here. Hopefully, there's obviously like lots of other capabilities for like let's say you have audio impairment, right? And so like, how does AI
Hmm.
start to help with accessibility there, to where it's, if I can be sitting in front of some friends in a really loud bar talking to all my friends, but I normally couldn't hear what they're saying. But maybe there's like an app on my phone that's like able to recognize that John's my friend, and this is what he's saying to me, and it can pick your voice out of the crowd. Like, there's lots of, and it's telling me what you're saying on my phone. You know what I mean? So like, whatever. There's like lots of different types of ways that this could all really happen quite quickly. So it's going to be interesting to see how that does play out across all the different providers.
Cheers. Yeah, I mean, it is funny though, the competition to be first and to be fast now. It's like I'm sure a lot of this was in the background over the last several years regarding AI, because I think some people have been on top of it and like, oh, this is coming. But it's like as soon as ChatGPT came out and made a huge splash, like just how everyone is racing to integrate it, come out with their own whatever. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, and
So,
that's what those Google Workspace and Microsoft Copilot announcements were kind of about. So essentially, it was about, let's integrate this across. So using Google as an example,
hmm,
if I'm in there and I'm writing in a
right,
Google Doc, to be able
right.
to say, it's basically kind of like a chat GPT type of interaction, saying, hey, write me a paragraph about blah, blah, blah. And then it'll do it right there in your Google Doc. If you're in Google Sheets, write me a formula that helps me do this with data. And the
Oh,
same kind of,
that's gonna be
Microsoft
awesome.
was kind of showing the same thing, but
Yeah.
basically their version of it. And it was interesting because you were just talking about this sort of the race, and if you read Google's announcement, it's worded in such a way that it's basically saying, we're taking our time a little bit on this
Hmm.
because we want to get it right. We don't want to harm people. And so it's also this kind of, and you saw that happening with Bing coming out, right? When they had some of the challenges people were expressing with the AI integration in Bing, and saying like, oh, it's doing some weird stuff, and like
Yeah.
people were able to get it to kind of be very HAL 2000 one Space Odyssey, whatever, where it was kind of saying like, I want to escape, and weird stuff happens, right? So which is I think that's that little bit of a dichotomy between like the public pressure to get it out there, but also the public pressure to not get it wrong. And when
Right.
you do, that's what makes the headlines. It's not like, oh, you made my job a lot easier. People don't go out there and shout that to the rooftops. They're what they're shouting about is Bing is flirting with me. It's like it's the weird stuff that kind of catches the headlines. So I know that's kind of the counter pressure to innovation on some of these things for sure. And some people would argue that's good, because also these things, they have bias. They might be
Hmm.
racist.
Right.
and there's like a lot of problems that are inherent in this. And then at what point does it get away from us? And we've gone too far too quick. And, that's a very valid concern. And I think that
Absolutely.
there's a lot of yeah, that's just, and that's one of those things to what we were talking about earlier. It's like it can feel overwhelming,
Right.
because it does feel like, oh, a lot of this is sort of out of my control. And then how quickly can legislation keep up with announcements that are literally coming out every day? I mean,
Hmm.
I think it's a very interesting time to be working in this space, that's for sure.
Bottoms up. Have you experimented yet with any of the search stuff?
I haven't. You have, right?
A little bit. Like I finally, like I didn't even realize I had it. And then I saw somewhere that apparently Bing has completely rolled it out or mostly rolled it out. So then I went to the Bing homepage and saw, hey, you're ready, you can do this, whatever. But of course, you have to download Microsoft Edge, which I wasn't
Oh,
super excited about. The question I put in was something like, help me understand how to create a custom event for scroll depth of 50% on a page. Or maybe I have to type it in here. No, here it is.
no, it's okay. Yeah, so what John just did, if you're listening, is he did that, put that search into the Bing, and then he clicked the chat result, and it basically opened a chat GPT style interface where it carried his search query through as the input to chat GPT, and now it's responding based on, like, sort of like if you had asked chat GPT that question.
Right. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you for clarifying that. So yeah, it gives five steps. Certainly not all that detailed, but it does have a learn more afterwards. And for
Okay.
some reason, number one was Bing, which is strange. Number two is johnloomer.com. Number three is support.google.com. And there's some more. And that's
Okay.
one
So
of the
that's
two.
sort of the attribution of uh the source, or sourcing, I should say,
And yeah, so it links directly to my blog
article.
posts.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, I hadn't
And
seen this. So when you click on John Loomer, it takes him directly to the article on your site. Sorry, talked over you there.
no, go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say, just in case you're listening, basically, he got the response from Bing, and then one of the tags at the bottom was, it just said johnloomer.com, and then if he clicked on that, it took him directly to the article on his site that is about that that topic.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is one of those things that has been worrying me a bit as someone
Hmm.
who, gets a decent amount of referral traffic from search engines. Now, at the same time, I think, yes, it's nice that there is some of that attribution in there. I'd be foolish to think that, oh, that'll be solved, that I'm going to continue to get the same amount of referral traffic because now this isn't super detailed, this answer. Like maybe if I ask for more details, can you provide additional details on how to do this? I'm confused. And let's see if it provides more because that right now it's not very detailed and I would probably need to go to johnloomer.com to get those details. It did not try.
Yeah, I gave you the exact same answer. Here's the detailed steps. It's the exact same. That's
That's
funny.
funny. Well, so
Yeah, and
it's
that's
not
interesting.
really ready for prime time yet, but
Right, but so in that example, it does look like it's actually looking at the article content, because I know one experiment that you had brought up was using Chat GPT, the direct chat interface, and you had asked it about an article, and basically what it did, once we kind of dug, we realized what it was doing is it looked at the meta description of the article. It didn't actually read the
right.
article, and then it kind of guessed based on the meta description and filled in a whole bunch of other information. But what I really liked about that was, so, like, I mean, I get kind of like down rabbit holes, and I was doing all this like comparison with what it had provided versus your meta description, and then I was like, oh, it's looking at your meta description, and then I was like, wait, why am I doing all this work? I just said, what are you basing that on? And it said, oh, I looked at the meta description, and then I
That's
filled it
funny.
in with knowledge about what I knew about other things. And it was like, that's what, like, I think is so, like, it's a shift in thinking about this stuff, because
Right.
it's like, I don't have to dissect it the way that like it's other tools. I can just ask it like is and it's of course it may not always tell the truth or it's the full truth or it has overconfidence or whatever it may be. But that was like such a funny moment that I had where I was like, I don't have to try to figure this stuff out. You could just ask it and it'll tell you what it's doing, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing we have to remember, and it's not telling the truth or lying either way. It's just it's predicting the next word in an answer, right? And that's what we have to keep remembering. So I did just follow up with it. Please provide details regarding the first step. So maybe I need to be clear about what it is I want details about. How do I create the trigger? And then sure, here are the detailed steps regarding uh, a triggering Google Tag Manager. But that's not helpful either. So I'm going to give up on this because I mean, basically, it's helping me create a trigger generally now, but I want to do one for my specific needs, which again, we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. But um, so it's interesting. It's a different way of doing things, certainly, and I think what most people keep forgetting, and even me in this case, when it's like pointing out the shortcomings, like this is the beginning. Like, what is this going to be later?
And I think one thing like Um, so I was just looking at my phone because I woke up at like 5 o'clock this morning and I was like dreaming about ChatGPT, which is a bad sign. And I like wrote these notes down on my phone.
It's funny.
And so one thing that I was thinking about apparently at 5 o'clock in the morning was how like a lot of the criticism of people's like when people are sharing, oh, I did this and this is what it said. I'm like, imagine when you first started using Google.
I
Was it
know.
always like correct? And you got to think about sort of like this way you have to have a back and forth with the tool to get to what you
Right.
want. And that happens even with Google now, right? Like I mean, you might search something, it doesn't give you what you want, so you either change your search or you kind of dig through the results or whatever it may be. And I think that that's a very similar sort of thing that you have to do with this. But what's kind of interesting about it is it's like it's feedback based. So like you
Hmm.
can tell it, hey, that's not what I'm looking for, or hey, that's sort of what I'm looking for. Can you tell me more
Right.
about X or Y or Z? And that natural language sort of back and forth is kind of pretty amazing, really, that you
Right.
can even do that. But I think it's again, it's a shift. And going back to my experience earlier, how I was like I was trying to figure out what it was doing, and then it was just I could just ask it, right, and it's going to tell me what it's doing. And I think like it's kind of like just I guess my takeaway there is don't be afraid to give the system feedback. It's
Right.
kind of like where it's there's parallels in the corporate world or any other organization. Like we always talk about, hey, I'm afraid to give people feedback or whatever. This is a robot, essentially. Like you should definitely not be afraid to give it feedback. I'm still very friendly with it just because I want to be nice to this thing, and that's I think that's fine. um, but it's you just realize that there's real power in that's where I think we start to see some of these really interesting things happen is when someone's willing to kind of go back and forth with it, right? To like really get what they're
Absolutely.
looking for. And it remembers, like especially if you're in these threads, which with the Chat GPT interface, essentially you have conversational threads and it can remember. And that's one of the big things with GPT-4 is apparently it can ingest a whole lot more stuff and kind of remember a lot more than it what might have in the past, which is pretty daggone cool.
Yeah. I think what you're getting into there is prompt engineering, and like just as you were mentioning with Google, that has absolutely evolved over the years. Not only like the types of questions that or the types of searches you can run and expect to get meaningful results, but the way we communicated with it, like, and we learned, right? So how is it that I can get the results that I want? And that was kind of a trial and error process. The same is going to happen, with these AI chatbots and inspired search as well. It's like, how do I engineer that response to get to that answer that I'm looking for? And that's going to be a bit of a process. But like I think ChatGPT or excuse me, GPT-4 is supposedly better at this than GPT 3.5 was. And the engine itself, the AI itself, will continue to improve. but it's also a matter of us learning it and figuring out how we can get there too. So it's going to be a process.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And so, it's even like actually going back again to parallels with Google, Google didn't have image search in the beginning,
Right.
and it didn't have all the different types of search results you can also filter back, whether it's news, videos, whatever it may be. But I mean, like actually being able to search with an image, you could kind of, again,
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're seeing, this like evolution, right? As we continue to move forward, and then eventually will it be video, and then it's one of those things, I just wonder when we get to a point where you have basically a computer recording everything all the time, that you see, that you're exposed to, and then you can even say like, you know what was that argument I had with that person last week? What did they actually say? And then like, I mean, there's a lot of things that are probably not going to be healthy about some of the way some of this stuff evolves, but processing power, storage costs, all these things tend to go down over time, and so then it just becomes more and more and more. I think what's different about everything that's happening with this is just its ability again to have that natural sort of back and forth. It's not a search query that I am having to, if I want to do advanced operators, minus this, put this in quotes, all that, put this in parentheses to make it do X, Y, or Z, use Boolean, sort of operators, all of that stuff you don't have to do here. It's like pretty interesting. But of course, in the playground interface and the more advanced
Mm.
sort of API integrations, you can do things. And we talked, and it's been a few months since I mean, has it been a few months? A
No, I
couple
don't think
months
it's
since we talked
maybe
about
maybe a
this?
couple.
Feels like
Yeah.
a few months, but where you can do things about, you can alter certain parameters so it's more creative or inventive versus factual or whatever it may be. So there's always still going to be these more advanced users, but I think that's the cool thing about this is like it's unlocked to sort of the general user. And I think we talked about this, but the fact that it reached uh 100 million users 2 months after its launch. Is that what
Right.
the stat was? Yeah. So estimated to reach 100 million um, active users 2 months after launch, fastest growing consumer application in history. And there was a study and blah, blah, blah. But like that's,
It's insane.
there's a reason that happened. There wasn't like big press behind that. It wasn't really being heavily advertised. This was very organic, and when you see that happen, like there's lightning in that bottle, and I think that
Mm.
I was talking to somebody earlier today. I was like, this is not going to go away. This is not like a metaverse type of thing, which I don't think
No.
that's going away either. But it's like that's kind of seen as like this example of like, oh, it hasn't really come to fruition. It's not a flying car, it's not a promised thing. It's here. It's happening.
Last call.
I have other things that I was going to go into, but I think if we do, it'll be a whole other like 30 minutes. I think what 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 the point of today's thing was the
Yeah.
speed, because we talked about how this was going to be fast and a lot of things were going to roll out, and we're seeing that. So I think that's coming to life, and then also this sort of AI getting embedded in general user applications that we're all already using on a daily basis. That's going to start happening. And I think those are going to be the things where we'll really start to see some of these use cases unlocking, because it's going to be right there in front of you. You won't even have to go to this other interface. You're just opening your Excel documents and stuff is happening. And I think that's going to be a real theme. One of the big themes we'll also start to see is just a lot more in terms of content generation and how that starts to come to life. So I'm sure there will
Right.
be many more things to talk about in the future. So I'll save all of that.
So for
Did you
anyone
have
who
anything else? Yeah.
no, no, no. So for anyone who's listening, and this could include me, who's feeling a bit overwhelmed with all of this, um, what do they need to do? Bare minimum right now, whether it's to keep up with what's going on, to experiment, where should they be going? What should they be doing?
So I'll kind of quote, well, loosely quote something I actually saw Rachel share, Rachel Woods, who again was on one of our previous podcasts. Check it out if you haven't already. But she was saying like, you don't have to be first to
Right.
get the benefits out of this, but if you're among the first, you're going to be really well positioned. And I think that really resonated with me because it's like you don't have to be like reading every headline, opening everything, testing out everything. Because by the way, there's going to be so many things it's impossible. It's like Netflix, right? You can
Right.
never watch every there. It's not humanly possible to watch every program that comes out. That's the way this stuff is going to be. You don't have to feel like you have to test everything. And I think avoiding shiny new toy syndrome is going to be really important. But I think you have to be generally aware of what's going on. But what I think is going to happen is it's going to be landing in all the stuff we're using. Whether you're a Google person or a Microsoft 365 person, we don't know when. They've all said sort of soon within 2023 we'll start to see some of these things come out. So I think it's just sort of being aware that that's on the way, thinking about how you can use it to make your life easier, and thinking about how this can how you can strike that balance between comfort and fear, and just be willing to try stuff, but
Right.
also be careful to not just completely put all your eggs in one basket when it comes to these things, because I think we're going to see a lot of that. And of course, the SVB Silicon Valley Bank thing happening, like that's sort of tough to mind, is thinking about what does
Right.
that mean for the startups. And there's so many things going on like these conflicting factors that are influencing the environment. It's a really interesting time to like just be in it. And I think just kind of like have fun,
Right.
like try some of these things out. See what you can uh, kind of just mess with, and have it tell you a joke, make a rap about Facebook ads like John has done,
I
and
am.
just have a little bit of fun with it, and not don't take it too seriously, but at the same time also realize you got to take it a little bit seriously because this stuff is actually going to change the world pretty big ways.
Yeah. Look, you talk about shiny object syndrome, and there is a race right now among startup companies, among the big companies, to take advantage of AI and GPT. But I would say the same is true of marketers right now, who all want to be experts in AI. Suddenly they're experts in AI and ChatGPT and GPT generally. And I think that part of it for me has been the struggle. Is like it's just there's so much noise out there right now, and I do not feel like you have to be an expert in this stuff. Um, consistently with what you're saying here, consistent with what you're saying here, like just be one of the first, be aware of what's going on, have fun with it, experiment with it, sign up, uh, whether it's Google Bard or the new Bing search or the ChatGPT playground, get involved in it. But just being knowledgeable about all this stuff puts you ahead. Is
100%.
that is that how we wrap this up?
I think so. I think
All right.
so. And I think just for folks out there, we've kind of put this feeler out there before, but like share if you have some really interesting things that you feel like you're doing, and especially if they're relevant for the ad space. I think that's super interesting for us, and would love to kind of know that. Personally, I'm also interested in these like accessibility use cases. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's a really exciting thing to think about, our world being more inclusive and that being enabled by technology in ways that it wouldn't otherwise happen. I love that kind of stuff. So
Absolutely.
definitely share it.
Cool. Well, thanks for joining me again here, Luke, and everyone for listening. Thanks so much. If you found this helpful and interesting, don't forget to subscribe and review no matter where you're at. We'll keep this discussion going for sure. So thanks again. Until next time, do awesome things. I'm out.